The void of space was deafening. From the viewport of the Starseeker, Dr. Aris Thorne stared at the endless black, speckled with stars so far away they felt like a dream. The ship glided through the cosmos, carrying a mission critical to humanity, to explore the uncharted depths of the asteroid belt. But with it came a crushing sense of isolation. Aris had spent months aboard with Commander Jax Rylee, her only crewmate, in this tiny metal capsule drifting through the infinite. Their check-ins with Earth had become routine, but lately the comm system was glitchy. The connection, though still there, grew patchy, leaving them feeling cut off, not just from the blue planet, but from reality itself. Both astronauts knew isolation was the mission's biggest challenge. The feeling of being trapped, millions of miles from any human contact, was starting to creep into their daily lives. Aris, chosen for her precision and mental toughness, buried herself in tasks, checking systems, fixing minor issues, tracking their course. But no matter how hard she tried, the cosmic void weighed on her. Jax, on the other hand, was the laid-back one. He'd crack jokes or toss out light remarks to cut the tension. His charm had been a lifeline early in the mission when things felt manageable, but even he was showing cracks. His laughter came less often, and sometimes staring at the control panels he'd zone out, like he was waiting for something that had never come. One night, as they reviewed routine reports, the link to Earth cut out. It wasn't the first time, but this felt different. Aris stared at the blank screen, willing the familiar voices of mission control to return. Probably just tweaking the signal, Jax said, leaning back in his chair, trying to sound chill. But his eyes betrayed him. He knew something was wrong. Aris sighed, her gaze fixed on the controls. Exhaustion showed in the dark circles under her eyes, but she stayed quiet. There was nothing to do but wait. The silence in the cabin grew heavy. Outside, the stars burned, cold and indifferent to human worries. Each one reminded them how small they were in the grand scheme. "You ever wonder if there's anyone else out there?" Jax asked, breaking the quiet. He meant life on other worlds. Aris didn't answer right away. She'd thought about it plenty since the mission began, but now the question hit differently. They were alone in the middle of nowhere. Who could know what was beyond? "Sometimes," she said at last. "But right now, I'm more worried about us." Jax nodded, catching her drift. Losing touch with Earth was scarier than any alien threat. "You're right," he muttered. "But hey, if things go south, at least we've got the stars." Aris gave a faint laugh. It was classic Jax, trying to lighten the mood, but even she could feel it. The silence of space was starting to win. The first day without comms dragged on. They stuck to their routines, but the ship felt emptier. Tension hung in the air like static, as if they were waiting for something else to break. At day's end, Aris sat by the viewport, staring into the starry abyss. For the first time in ages, she felt truly tiny, like a speck lost in an endless sea. "We're not alone," she whispered to herself, unsure if she believed it. Days without Earth's voice piled up, and the Starseeker started to feel like a moving prison. Aris tried to stay calm, sticking to her tasks, but the silence from ground control was a red flag. Jax kept up his jokes to fend off panic, but both knew they were on their own if things went bad. "What do you think's happening back home?" Jax asked one night over dinner. His tone was casual, but worry flickered in his eyes. "Could be anything," Aris said. "Tech issues, a solar flare, or just a comms glitch. We won't know till the signal's back." Deep down, though, she sensed something was off. It wasn't normal to go this long without a word, and the unease gnawed at her. Over the next few days, desperation showed in small ways. Jax sighed more as he checked the controls for the 100th time. Aris noticed her hands trembling slightly as she typed reports no one would read. The loneliness amplified every detail, with no familiar voices to ground them. One morning, while checking the navigation system, Jax broke the silence sharply. "We gotta talk about what's really going on, Aris." She paused, meeting his gaze, knowing what was coming. "We can't keep pretending this is just a comms issue," he said, hesitating. "If Earth's been quiet this long, something big might have happened, and we're out here clueless." Aris nodded slowly. She'd thought it too, but saying it out loud made the fear real. "You know what that means, right?" Jax said, his voice low. "We're alone." The words hit like a punch. They'd always known space was lonely, but this was different. The thought that Earth might be gone or in chaos filled them with dread they couldn't voice. "We don't know that for sure," Aris said, clinging to hope. "It could still be a temporary glitch." Jax looked at her but didn't argue. He knew she was trying to stay positive, but they both felt the same terror. The days after were a battle against the silence. Aris leaned on routine, checking systems, exercising, trying to sleep, but every task felt hollow. Without Earth, their mission seemed pointless. One night as they gazed at the stars, Jax spoke again. "Ever notice how weird this is?" he said softly. "We always pictured space as full of possibilities, maybe life. But out here, it just feels empty." Aris nodded, silent. She felt it too. Space in all its glory was an endless stretch of nothing, and they were just two specks in it. "What if we never hear from Earth again?" Jax asked suddenly. Aris blinked, caught off guard. They'd avoided that question, but now it demanded an answer. "I don't know," she said finally. "I guess we'd keep going, like we always do." Jax gave a slow nod, his face grim. They both knew keep going was easier said than done. The isolation was taking a toll, and it was only getting worse. Aris realized then how fragile they were. They'd trained for every scenario, but none covered being truly cut off from humanity. The void of space wasn't the scariest part. It was the chance that Earth had changed and they'd never know. Tension between Aris and Jax grew as days passed. The vastness of space felt claustrophobic inside the Starseeker's metal walls. Dark thoughts about Earth's fate started to color every moment. One afternoon, while tweaking the ship's solar panels, Jax broke the silence. "You ever wonder if we're really alone out here?" he asked, staring into the endless black through the viewport. Aris glanced at him, surprised by the shift. It was a question astronauts often pondered but rarely voiced. "I guess we all do," she said carefully. "Being this far out makes it feel more real, doesn't it?" Jax nodded, but he seemed lost in thought. "Sometimes I think the answer's already here," he said, his voice quieter. "Maybe we're not alone and we just haven't noticed yet." Aris frowned. Space could mess with your head, sending it down rabbit holes of unanswerable questions. But Jax's words carried a weight she couldn't shake. Cut off from Earth, alone in the void, they were seeing their place in the universe differently. The day passed in uneasy silence as they focused on routine tasks. But Jax's words lingered in Aris's mind. That night, a jolt woke them both. Emergency lights flashed red, bathing the ship in an eerie glow. "What was that?" Aris shouted, leaping from her bunk to the controls. Jax was already there, scanning the systems. "No clue," he said, brow furrowed. "It's not a mechanical failure, but something's messing with the sensors." They exchanged a look, realizing something strange was happening. The Starseeker was top-notch. Random glitches weren't normal. And everything had checked out fine in the last inspection. "I'm going outside to check," Jax said, his voice firm. Aris hesitated. A spacewalk without a clear reason was risky, but they couldn't ignore this. If something was affecting the ship from outside, they needed to know. "Be careful," she said as Jax suited up. The next few minutes felt like hours. Aris watched the external cameras, tracking Jax's every move. The silence of space felt heavier than ever. "Nothing looks off out here," Jax reported via comms. "Everything's normal." But his tone wasn't convincing. Maybe it was the absolute quiet outside, or the overwhelming sense of exposure in the vast cosmos. Jax finished and returned. When he removed his helmet, his face showed confusion and unease. "There was nothing out there," he said, dropping his gloves. "But I felt like something was watching me." Aris shivered. The idea of being watched in the emptiness of space was unnerving. Before she could respond, a green light blinked on the main console. A comms signal. "Is it ground control?" Jax asked, rushing over. Aris checked the codes and shook her head. "No, I don't know what this is." The signal was faint but real. Something or someone was trying to reach them from the void. The screen displayed strange characters like a coded message, but it was gibberish. They stared at the screen, unsure what to do. Could their loneliness have been an illusion? What if, out there in the vastness, they weren't alone? Aris's heart raced. They were in uncharted territory, physically and emotionally. Space, once silent and empty, was starting to whisper its secrets. Aris and Jax locked eyes, the blinking signal casting shadows across the cabin. The hum of the ship's systems felt louder in the tense quiet. Every second without answers ratcheted up the pressure. "Should we try to decode it?" Jax asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and dread. "I don't know," Aris said, frowning at the odd symbols. "It could be interference, or something else." Jax nodded, but something else didn't sit well. Protocol said to report unknown signals to Earth, but with ground control silent, they were on their own. "I'll try cleaning it up, see if we can make sense of it," Aris said, leaning over the controls. Her fingers danced across the panel, tweaking frequencies, hunting for clues. Time crawled as she worked, but slowly, the symbols started to form a pattern. It wasn't random noise. Someone or something was sending this on purpose. "This isn't natural," Aris whispered, pulling back, her face pale in the dim light. Jax peered at the screen, where the symbols now pulsed in a hypnotic rhythm. "Looks like a code," he said. "You ever seen anything like this?" Aris shook her head. Their training covered comms protocols, but this was beyond anything they knew. It didn't match any known system. "It's like they're talking to us, but we can't understand," she said, frustration mixing with confusion. Jax stepped back, pacing to clear his head. He stopped by the viewport, staring at the stars. The cosmos, once serene, now felt ominous. "What if we're not ready for whatever this is?" he asked, almost to the stars themselves. Aris watched him, feeling the ship's walls closing in. The irony of being trapped in the universe's vastness wasn't lost on her. "We don't have a choice," she said firmly, though doubts gnawed at her. "Whatever it is, we have to face it." They knew ignoring the signal wasn't an option. If it came from an intelligent source, human or otherwise, they needed to know why. But were they ready for the answers? "I'm sending a reply," Aris said suddenly, resolute. Jax turned, surprised. It was a bold move, but doing nothing wasn't in their nature. "Go for it," he said, trusting her. Aris typed a simple message. "Who are you?" The signal went out, and they waited. Breath held. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then the screen flickered. A reply came, but it wasn't what they expected. The new symbols were different but oddly familiar, like a half-remembered dream. They couldn't fully grasp them. "This makes no sense," Aris said, exasperated. "It's like a language we almost know." Jax stared at the code, a chilling thought forming. "What if it's not a language?" he said. "What if it's something else? A pattern, maybe biological or mathematical?" Aris's eyes narrowed, intrigued. Space was full of unknowns, and the idea that the answer might not fit their framework was daunting. "If that's true, we'd need help to crack it," she said, "and we're too far for that." The truth hit hard. They were alone, grappling with a puzzle they couldn't solve. But something shifted between them. The crushing loneliness felt lighter with each other's presence. That night, as they dimmed the cabin lights, they knew the mission had changed. Something out there was reaching for them. The message was unclear, but its existence was undeniable. What did it want? The Starseeker sailed through the cold, dark void. Despite the mystery of the signals, time marched on. But with each day, Aris and Jax felt the isolation deepen. Aris, usually the stoic science expert, grew introspective. The coded messages were a riddle, but her thoughts drifted to Earth. Her choices, her regrets, the life she'd left behind. One morning, over breakfast in the cramped galley, Jax broke the quiet with a question he'd been mulling over. "You miss anything from Earth?" he asked, eyes on his tray. Aris blinked, caught off guard. They'd trained to handle isolation, but now, living it, the question wasn't so simple. "I think—" She paused, choosing her words. "I miss nature. Fresh air, rain, everything here's so controlled. Every breath, every resource. Sometimes I forget what's real." Jax nodded. He felt it too, the disconnect from anything alive. Space was awe-inspiring, but its alienness made it feel hostile. "Sometimes I think about my family," Aris added softly. "Things I never said. Chances I missed chasing this career." Jax caught the tremor in her voice but didn't push. He knew she was wrestling with the same echoes he was. "I get it," he said. "My dad wanted me to take over the family business, but I couldn't settle for that. I needed something bigger. And now, here I am, in the middle of nowhere." Aris studied him, feeling a new connection. They shared that drive for greatness, but it had cost them pieces of themselves. "Ever wonder if it was worth it?" Jax asked. "All we gave up to be here. Look at us, lost, cut off, dealing with something we don't understand." Aris's eyes softened. She'd had those thoughts too. Space, her lifelong dream, now felt like a trap. "Maybe we're here to find something we don't yet get," she said, a spark of hope in her voice. "A purpose bigger than us." Jax gave a small smile, grateful for her words, though doubt lingered. The unknown was crushing, and their bond, though growing, couldn't fully shield them. They sat in silence, lost in thought, when the console beeped. An alert. Again, Aris muttered, rushing to check it. The signal was back, but different, less chaotic, more structured. It felt like it was adapting. "It's responding to us," Aris said, stunned. Jax leaned in, studying the patterns. They were clearer now, almost deliberate. "What if we've been reading it wrong?" he said. "What if it's not alien? What if it's from Earth?" The cabin's air grew thick. If the signal wasn't extraterrestrial, it meant someone or something on Earth had been trying to reach them all along. Why hadn't they seen it before? The cabin buzzed with tension. Jax and Aris stared at the symbols, disbelief mixing with curiosity. If the signal was from Earth, everything they thought they knew about the mission was wrong. Aris dove into decoding, her hands flying over the controls. The once chaotic pattern now showed structure, a hidden message. "This can't be," she murmured, eyes glued to the screen. Jax stood beside her, trying to make sense of it. The silence of space seemed louder. They felt something big was coming. After what felt like forever, the screen displayed clear text. A simple, chilling message. "You're in danger. Return." Jax read aloud, his voice echoing in the small cabin. They stared at each other, floored. What did it mean? How could Earth know their situation? "Who sent this?" Jax asked, skeptical. "We haven't heard from base in months." Aris frowned, processing the discovery. The signal they'd thought was alien seemed familiar now, but that didn't explain how it reached them, or what danger they faced. "I don't know," she said, uneasy. "But this signal's been here since the mission started. We've been missing the warnings." Jax paced, his mind racing. Was the mission a setup? Had Earth changed so much it was now a threat? "Should we head back?" he asked, pausing by the viewport. Aris bit her lip, torn. Returning meant abandoning the mission, their life's work, but the message's urgency was undeniable. "We need to decide," she said, eyes on the console. "This isn't random. Someone's trying to warn us." Jax nodded, feeling the stakes, but he sensed there was more to it, something they didn't grasp. "Let's try contacting base," he suggested. "Maybe now we'll get through." Aris fired up the comms, her hopes low. Months of silence hadn't inspired confidence, but they had to try. The quiet stretched. Then a distorted voice crackled through. "This is ground control. We received your message. What's your status?" The astronauts froze, shocked. It was the first response in ages. The voice was faint, like it was fighting to reach them. "This is Dr. Aris Thorne, Stardust Mission," she replied, steady despite her pounding heart. "What's happening on Earth? We got a warning to return. No details." A pause, then the voice returned. "Earth's situation is complex. Comms have been disrupted. We can't say more here. Return immediately." The line cut off, leaving more questions than answers. The silence returned, now laced with urgency. "Something's wrong," Jax said, eyeing the navigation controls. "They're holding back." "I know," Aris said, staring at the console. "If we go back, we ditch the mission. If we stay, we might be screwed." The choice was brutal. Space, with its mysteries, felt hostile. Earth, their safe haven, was now a question mark. Aris stood, locking eyes with Jax. "We decide together," she said firmly. "Something's off, and we need to know why." Jax nodded, the warning echoing in his head. "You're in danger. Return." Would going back fix anything, or lead to something worse? With the mission hanging in the balance, their next move could change everything. The cabin fell silent after Earth's abrupt sign-off. The warning lingered, charging the air with dread. Jax and Aris stood still, each grappling with the stakes. "We can't just sit here," Jax said, breaking the quiet. "If we're in danger, we gotta move." Aris nodded, her eyes on the console. He was right, but every option had consequences. Ditching the mission meant throwing away years of sacrifice. Ignoring the warning could be deadly. "Maybe we can dig deeper into the signal," she suggested. "Get more info before we choose." "We can't fully trust what they said, if that was even real." Jax hesitated. Doubting ground control felt wrong, but the gaps in their story were glaring. Maybe Aris was onto something. Maybe they were being played. "Let's do it," he said. "If there's more to learn, we need it now." Aris got to work, tweaking the system to analyze the signal's data. Every move was precise. They couldn't afford mistakes. As the decoding ran, Jax's thoughts drifted to Earth. If they returned, what would they find? What had happened to jeopardize their mission? The cabin's hum was the only sound. The isolation, once routine, now felt suffocating. Space's beauty had turned into a reminder of their fragility. "Got something," Aris said, her voice tight. "Another message." Jax rushed over, eyes on the screen as Aris pulled up the new data. The words were even stranger than before. "Earth isn't safe. Trust no one." Aris read, her voice heavy with disbelief. Jax felt a chill. This message clashed with the order to return. Who could they trust? Was ground control compromised, or was something else at play? "This is nuts," Jax said, rubbing his temples. "One says go back, the other says don't. What do we do?" Aris sank into her chair, drained. They were being pulled apart, and any wrong move could be fatal. "All we know for sure," she said, taking a deep breath, "is we're alone. Right here, it's just us. We can't trust Earth or these signals." Jax nodded, her words ringing true. It had always been them against the void, but now even their partnership was strained. Every choice affected not just the mission, but their survival. "So what's the call?" he asked, the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Aris paused, weighing their options. Each carried risks and none offered clarity. "Let's stick to our current course for now," she said. "We don't head back yet, but we don't ignore the warning either. Keep monitoring, gather more data before we lock in." Jax frowned but saw her logic. Rushing to change course without facts could be as bad as ignoring the threat. Staying put bought time, even if it felt like an enemy. "All right," he said, "but we stay sharp. Something big's going down." The decision was made, but it brought no relief. They were walking a tightrope where one slip could be their last. As the ship pressed on, the universe remained vast and silent. The stars twinkled, uncaring of the humans struggling in their tiny corner of the cosmos. To Jax and Aris, the stars had never felt so far, and the space that once thrilled them now seemed to drive a wedge between them and the safety they craved. The next days were restless. Jax and Aris took shifts watching for signals and scanning for glitches. The tension between them, though unspoken, was thick. They knew something was deeply wrong, but facing it head-on felt impossible. "We've checked every system," Jax said one day, exhausted. "No errors, nothing explains these signals." Aris looked up from the console, her face set with resolve. "I know, but someone or something is sending them. We have to figure out who." Jax nodded, but it wasn't just the source that worried them, it was the intent. Why the warnings? What was the endgame? As they pushed through their routines, doubts grew heavier. They skirted talk of Earth's fate. It was too painful to consider their home unsafe. The ship itself felt alien, filled with suspicion and unanswered questions. One day, Aris's face lit up as she pored over the signal data. "Jax, check this out," she said, barely containing her excitement. He hurried over. The screen showed a pattern they'd missed, a hidden code buried in the signals. "Is it encrypted?" he asked, intrigued. Aris nodded. "Yeah, and it's complex. It's not just a warning. There's more here we haven't seen." They dove in, decoding together. Hours passed, excitement giving way to dread. What they found confirmed their fears and added new layers of mystery. "This isn't just a warning," Aris said, her eyes wide. "It's like a log, or a record. Someone's been watching our mission from the start." Jax's stomach twisted. "What's that mean?" he asked, his voice tight. "It means we're not alone," Aris said quietly. "Everything we've done, every choice, someone else knows." The cabin's air grew heavy. Jax sank into his seat, reeling. Being watched from day one was deeply unsettling. "Who could do this?" he asked, half to himself. Aris had no answers. All they knew was the signal's source wasn't just observing, it had shaped events from the beginning. Worse, they didn't know how much more was planned, or if they could break free. The days after were a tug-of-war between decoding the signal and fearing what they'd uncover. One day, Jax broke the tense quiet. "Aris, we can't keep going like this. We need a plan." She met his gaze, seeing his worry. "I know we're close to something huge," she said, "but if we push forward, we have to be ready for what we find." Jax nodded, but the uncertainty was eating at them. Their bond, born in the stars, was fraying under the strain of what lay ahead. That night as they slept, a new signal hit the system, clearer, more direct. It woke Aris, who rushed to the console. When Jax joined her, She was already analyzing it. "It's aimed at us," she said, her voice steady but shaken. The screen showed coordinates, a specific spot in the void. It was like a beacon guiding them somewhere. "What do we do?" Aris asked, knowing this was the moment. Jax looked at her, then spoke with grim resolve. "We have no choice. If we want answers, we go." Aris knew he was right. The ship was built for a set path, but now with coordinates in hand, they could choose their way. It was a chance to question their fate, but it was a one-way trip. "Let's do it," she said, firm. With shaky hands, Aris entered the coordinates. Jax stood by her, fear and resolve mixing. They knew the truth they sought had a cost, one they might not be ready to pay. As the ship shifted course, the silent cosmos watched. The stars danced on, blind to the humans hurtling toward the unknown. Jax and Aris spent days cracking the hidden code. The fragments they uncovered fueled their unease. The signals weren't from some AI or automated system. They came from a human source, or something that knew their mission inside out. One night, Jax froze as he scanned the logs. "This doesn't add up," he said, staring at the screen. "These entries, they're from before our mission even started." Aris leaned in, skeptical. "How?" "Look," Jax said, pointing to dated logs. "It's like someone mapped out every move we'd make before we launched. This isn't just surveillance. It's like they scripted it." The realization hit hard. Their mission, their journey to the stars, felt predetermined, like they were pawns in a larger game. "You think everything we've done was planned?" Aris asked, fear creeping in. Jax exhaled. "If these logs are real, we've been played from the start." Aris sat beside him, grappling with the idea that their choices might not be theirs. It shook her to her core. "Who could pull this off?" she asked, staring at the stars. "And why?" Jax had no solid answers. The signal's source had orchestrated their mission, but the scope of it and their role was still unclear. The days after were a grind, torn between decoding and dreading the truth. One evening, Jax spoke up. "Aris, we need to decide. We can't keep chasing this forever." She saw the strain in his eyes. "I know we're close to something big," she said, "but if we keep going, we might not like what we find." Jax nodded. Their bond, forged in isolation, was fragile now, tested by the looming revelations. That night, a new signal woke Aris sharp and direct. She called Jax to the console. "It's for us," she said, studying the transmission. The signal held coordinates, pointing to a spot in the void. It was a clear invitation. "What's our move?" Aris asked, feeling the weight of the moment. Jax met her gaze. "We go," he said. "It's the only way to know." Aris knew he was right. They could follow the path laid out or forge their own. It was their choice, but it might be their last. "Then we go," she said, resolute. Aris punched in the coordinates, her hands steady despite the fear. Jax stood close, their shared resolve cutting through the dread. The truth awaited, and its price might be steep. As the ship veered toward the unknown, the stars watched, silent and eternal. The Starseeker crept toward the coordinates, the tension inside thick. Jax and Aris stayed quiet, each lost in thought, aware this moment could change everything. As they neared the destination, the cabin hummed with anticipation. The control screen flashed a warning. Ahead, a massive metal structure loomed in the void's shadows. It looked abandoned, lifeless, but its scale was staggering. A labyrinth of steel among the stars. Neither could have imagined this. "What is that?" Aris asked, awestruck. Jax checked the scanners, finding no activity. "Some kind of station," he said. "But it's dead. No power, no life." They shared a glance, briefly considering turning back, but they were too close to the truth to stop. Jax began docking procedures, aligning the ship with an entry point. After a soft thud, they were locked in. "Ready," Jax said, his voice a mix of grit and nerves. "Let's check it out." They suited up, the ship's artificial gravity a fleeting comfort before the unknown. Aris double-checked her gear, nodding to Jax. He opened the hatch. Darkness swallowed them as they moved through the station's metal halls. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, revealing dusty walls and ancient panels, untouched for decades, maybe centuries. After what felt like miles of empty corridors, they hit a sealed door. Aris tried the controls, but the station was offline. "It's locked tight," she said. Jax knelt by the panel, tinkering with exposed wires. "Let me try," he said, his hands steady. Aris watched, her breath quickening. They were on the brink of something massive. After a few minutes, Jax sparked a small generator. Lights flickered and the door groaned open. Beyond was a control room, dark screens, dusty consoles, and in the center, a glass capsule. Inside was a human figure. "No way," Aris whispered, stepping closer. Jax moved in, inspecting the capsule. The figure was in stasis, barely alive, its monitors faintly glowing. Then he saw something chilling on the panel. This is us," he said, his voice shaking. Aris froze, her mind reeling. Up close, the figure wasn't identical, but eerily similar, like an older version of them. "This can't be," she said, stepping back. "How?" Jax dug into the panel's data. The capsule had been active for centuries, long before their mission. Its purpose, an experiment on time and space, using human clones as test subjects. "We're part of a test," Jax said, the truth sinking in. "We're not the first, and we might not be the last." Aris sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Their mission, their bond, the signals, it was all engineered. But now they knew. "What now?" she asked, her voice faint. Jax gazed at the stars through the control room's window. They had the truth, but one question lingered. What did it mean for them? Were they free or trapped in an endless loop? "I don't know," he said, "but whatever we do, it's our call." They locked eyes, knowing one chapter had ended, but another was beginning. They'd faced the unknown, defied reality's limits, and stayed together. "Then we keep going," Aris said, standing. With that, they left the control room, stepping into the void of the future, ready for whatever came next, together. Thank you for watching Bloom Between Us. If you enjoyed this emotional love story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for daily heartfelt romance and inspiring stories. Share with friends who believe in true love and second chances. Your support helps us keep bringing beautiful tales of connection and growth.